What's up, guys? I'm calling this episode 76.1 of the Human Predator Packmule podcast, and I'm doing it because I answered a question last time about why people can sustain high heart rates when they should be aerobically deficient. I didn't answer that question to my liking, so I wanted to get back on and give that a better answer, because I don't know what happened. I got kind of distracted when I was answering it, and I just I just didn't give it the depth that it deserved. So I want to do that with this right now. So the question was kind of two parts. Why can someone who is aerobically deficient get their heart rate up so high and keep it there? And then why is it difficult for someone that shouldn't be aerobically deficient to get their heart rate up and keep it there? And so the first thing I'm going to do is walk through like a quick energy systems breakdown and then talk about each part of that question. So we have three energy systems, two energy systems and one that breaks into subparts. So we have our aerobic system. Aerobic means with oxygen. And we have our anaerobic system, which means without oxygen. They're kind of weird designations because even the anaerobic system has to operate with oxygen to recover. But those are why they're called that. So anaerobic means without oxygen, aerobic means with oxygen. The anaerobic system breaks down into two parts. So the first part is alactic, so that means without lactate. The second part is lactic, and so that means with lactate. All of your energy systems are active when you're moving, right? The intensity and the duration of the exercise determines which energy systems are going to be most active at a given time. So for example, if you're doing a 8-second sprint and then you have full rest after that, you're going to use your anaerobic alactic system to do the work, and you're going to do most of your recovery with the aerobic system after that. Okay, so alactic, you might be working at full intensity for that 8 seconds, but it's not a long enough duration to start recruiting your lactic aspect of your anaerobic system. Now, you start to jack that up to 20 seconds or more. Now you're going to start to get into your lactic anaerobic system. Okay, and then if you're going at lower intensities and for longer durations, you're going to use your aerobic system. Okay, for the most part. Now, there are different thresholds at which we predominate with one part of our energy systems or the other. So, for example, I use what's called a conditioning house to kind of explain this. So, the very foundation of the house is your resting heart rate. And I'll take a step back. The goal is for us to build the biggest possible house that we can, okay? So we want the foundation to be as deep into the ground as we can, and we want the ceiling to be as high as we can possibly make it, all right? So the foundational, the ground, the bottom of the foundation, the bottom of the basement is your resting heart rate. We want to get that down as much as we possibly can, okay? So the first floor is your aerobic threshold. So underneath your first floor, you are predominantly using aerobic energy, your aerobic system to produce energy. From the first floor up to the second floor, you're above aerobic threshold, so you're going to be recruiting more of your anaerobic energy system, lactic system. And then once you hit the second floor, between the second floor and the ceiling, once you hit the second floor, you're at lactic threshold, or lactate threshold. So once you're above that, you are predominantly using your anaerobic lactic system to produce energy. So we want to make our first floor as high as possible, and we want to make our second floor as high as possible. So we are predominantly using our aerobic system to produce energy, okay? Wanted to give that background before we get into the rest of what I'm going to talk about. So the question of how can someone that is aerobically deficient get their heart rate up and keep it there? It's because a lot of times what happens is people train themselves knowingly or unknowingly to be able to do that. For example, we used to have a bunch of people that would come to us from Orange Theory Fitness at my gym back in Virginia. And these people would go make incredible gains at Orange Theory, and then they would plateau really fast because there's only so much room for you to go with your anaerobic system if you don't have the aerobic foundation to support it, both to recover so you can add more intensity or more volume to your intense training, and because there's just a lower threshold for gains there, because when you train your anaerobic lactic system, most of the adaptations are metabolic. So that means enzymatic and things like that. When you train your aerobic capacity, so with that staying below that first floor, like I was talking about, between the basement and the first floor, you train things more structurally. So you increase how much blood your heart pumps out with each beat. You increase the capillary density in your muscles. You increase the amount of mitochondria in your muscles, and you develop your slow twitch fibers. So all of that allows you to continue to make gains over time. And plus, all of those structures support your recovery from your high intensity work. If you build all of that foundation, you can operate at faster rates and have higher outputs at lower heart rates. That's one of the main reasons we spend so much time in human predator Packmule focused on aerobic capacity. So if you don't build that, the first thing that your heart is going to do is going to jump to those higher heart rates where you've been. You train it that when we start to exercise, you train your brain that when we start to exercise, we go to this high heart rate. And then we stay there for the duration of the exercise. The problem with that is it's not very efficient. It often leads to poor movement. And it also creates poor tissue quality. People with better developed aerobic systems have improved tissue quality, mostly because of blood flow. But people that don't have a good aerobic system, poor tissue quality, often higher rates of injury, and they just plateau way faster. But they can get up there and maintain their heart rate above threshold because they've trained themselves to do that. Now, that might sound great and it might seem like a good idea. You should be able to get to high heart rates and maintain work, and that's something that we train to do, but you have to have the other foundation first. If you don't, you will not recover very well from that work, and you can't repeat that work. So it looks like, oh man, this person's really fit. It's like, great, yeah, they have that for 30 to 45 minutes, and they can get their heart rate up and keep it there, but that is the only option they have, because they don't have the aerobic capacity to be efficient and move for long durations while keeping their heart rate down. That brings us to the second answer, is why is it so hard for people that are not aerobic deficient, that have put in the time to develop their aerobic capacity, why is it hard for them to get their heart rate up and keep it there? And it's because of that efficiency, right? Because first of all, neuromuscularly, you recruit a lot of muscle mass to be able to maintain that. And there's fatigue that comes from that. So like, for example, the best endurance athletes in the world spend most of their time training in zone 1 because they're so efficient that if they go up to zone 2, it causes more muscle damage. And you can stratify that out across the population as people get fitter. So the fitter you are, the higher cost from your exercise, and your body is trained to know that with its own wisdom. So you're not going to sustain those higher heart rates when you're that efficient because, first of all, you don't need to, and second of all, because there's a higher cost to it. And there's a higher cost to it. So you're not going to get up there and keep your heart rate there. One of the examples I used in the last podcast was, VO2 max training. We do a lot of VO2 max training, not a lot of VO2 max training. We do VO2 max training for the people that should be doing it, and we do it every year. And during the course of a VO2 max block, what you'll notice is that during your first week, your heart rate gets high. During the next week, your heart rate doesn't get quite as high. It still gets high, but as you start to adapt, you get more efficient and your aerobic power increases. So it's a longer time for you to hit that threshold for you to start to recruit more of your lactic system. That efficiency keeps your heart rate down. So you're not going to get it up there and sustain it because you don't need to. You can do the same amount of output or more output at a lower heart rate. So your body's not going to take you up to that heart rate and make you keep it there. Now, that depends on duration, right? If you continue to exercise, there's something called cardiac drift, where throughout the course of a workout, your heart rate will increase and it's harder to keep your heart rate down. It's from different things like body temperature, fueling, things like that. But that is one of the main reasons that when people get efficient aerobically, they have a harder time keeping their heart rate up, mostly just because they don't need to. And the cost is greater. They're also better at preferentially burning fats instead of carbohydrates. And so you don't need to get your heart rate up to have the same output. And And that's one of the things that happens when people operate at those high heart rates all the time. And is when you see, like if you go out on a hunt, like the guy that can kill it on day 1, but sucks on day 2 and then is toast by day 3, is they've operated at such high heart rates that they burn through all of their carbs. And if you don't get that replenished, you're gonna have a hard time. You're also just not gonna recover because your aerobic system hasn't been developed to the point that allows you to recover to repeat your efforts on the second days. So if you see these people that are able to get these high heart rates and work out really hard for 30 to 45 minutes, don't necessarily celebrate that. It might be just because they are woefully inefficient. They don't have the tissue quality they need, and they don't have the recovery system that they need. And so what you're gonna see from stuff like that is they're really good at gym workouts that are hard and last for 30 to 45 minutes, but they're not good at sustaining effort, recovering, and doing it over time. So the main reason that people can get their heart rate up that high, maintain it for 30 minutes or whatever, is because they don't have the option to keep it down. So they have to go up and go to that, those high heart rates because they don't have the energy systems to maintain efficiency and keep their heart rate down. People that have aerobic efficiency, have developed their aerobic system, are not aerobically deficient, don't need to do that. So it's harder for them to get their heart rate up there and maintain it because their body can produce the same amount of speed, the same amount of output at lower heart rates. So it's not gonna take you up there. If you really had to go there, you could, but for the most part, you're just not gonna get there and sustain it because you can do everything you need to do at lower heart rates because you're efficient. Okay. I feel a lot better about that answer, so I wanted to get back on and explain that to you guys. I hope this clears. I didn't get any questions, honestly. This was just me being like, man, that wasn't good enough. I want to go explain that better. And so I feel like I just did a better job. Thanks for tuning in, and I hope this helped.